Hello and welcome to On the Bench. I'm your host for this episode, Brendan Sinone. I'm joined by Chris Nee over here, there. Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Zach Blostein down there. Hello, Zach.
Hi, guys.
Hi, guys. Let's get into it. It's going to be a busy episode here of On the Bench. A lot to get to. The portal is open. There are departures. There are kind of targets. We do love the transactional aspect of the offseason, and it is always transitioning because of poor choice of words there. It is always transitioning though because of NCAA and guardrails and not really having a whole lot of that. But we do love it. We love covering the comings and goings of the offseason. So that's what we specialize in. That's what we're going to lean into this episode. Before we get any further into it, let's give a shout out to two of our wonderful sponsors. First off, Chattanooga Whiskey, crushing it in the craft distillery game. They do a fantastic job with craft whiskeys, rye, bourbon, cast strength bourbon. They're 111 proof. Awesome. You can find it throughout the state of Florida. Look for some of their specialty batches as well. They do a phenomenal job with experimental stuff. Just everything they do is legitimately good, interesting, different, unique, and high quality. Please support them. You guys have, and please continue to. We appreciate that. And if you're looking to buy or sell a home in the state of Florida, who would you guys go to?
The Turner Group.
Group. Yes, Colin, Amy Turner do an awesome job in the realty. Sorry, Colin, in that realm, in that market. Colin is very well versed in everything with the home buying, home selling process. He's well connected. You do get the boutique agency type of feel because there's just a few of them on staff. But because he is so connected and because he just works really, really hard, he's the dude for you. To be frank and to just kind of stutter F my way through this read. Sorry, Colin. All right, guys, you want to get into it?
Yes.
All right. The transfer portal is officially open, and there have been a handful of departures for Florida State so far. I think that's going to be our starting point, and then kind of get into the impact of it, what it means. If we want to dive deep into the meaning of it behind things that I love to do, we can do that as well. I'm here for it, obviously. Let's see. On my little cheat sheet here, we have wide receiver Jordan Scott. Zach broke that news last week. He is in the portal after just a few months on campus, came to FSU from the JUCO ranks. We'll talk about that. Hakeem Williams, FSU's lone composite five-star of the Mike Norvell era, is gone. We were told that FSU didn't put up a huge fight there for him to be retained when they talked about whether he's going to come or go, or stay or go, I should say. Jaylen Brown tied to an off-field incident, kind of an abrupt departure. That's your wide receiver group, lost 3 in a pretty short span. Offensive line, Jalen Early, that was a bit abrupt as well. He's gone. Defensive line, Aaron Hester. Defensive line, Denaz White. More so depth pieces. Those weren't big surprises. Am I missing anyone, Chris?
TJ Ferguson, who jumped in yesterday, and Trevor Jackson started the whole shebang at the beginning of the process here.
Yeah, that was Trevor Jackson was a big deal for some, not a big deal for those who were at most 24/7. Not to knock Trevor Jackson, but just he was a good walk-on quarterback, and that's what he was. Where do we want to start, guys? Zach, you're unmuted. What do you got?
Yeah, if my connection stays steady, I've been phasing in and out. With the departures, right?
Yes.
I could barely hear when it was going on. I mean, the most noteworthy one I think is Hakeem, right? Hakeem Williams entering.
Why?
From
a dreaded word potential. Yes.
Well, it's less about what his impact would have been, but it's more so I think just about what it says about the program, right? I mean, this is the guy that was kind of Mike Norvell's recruit a couple cycles ago, the lone 5-star that he signed in the composite, and it doesn't work out after only 2 years on campus. So thanks.
Please mute your phone, Zach.
Thanks, Brendan. From a pure his impact on the roster this season, I don't think it's that big of a deal. There are guys I think Jaylen Brown at receiver was going to be a bigger impact than Hakeem this upcoming season. But I think just what it says about their recruiting operation and just the trajectory of the program is not great, because I mean, this is a guy that's, Hakeem's, they don't sign a lot of 5-stars, and he's that one that they signed. And for it to not work out for him, they don't. It's not like they're getting guys in of that caliber often. So when you do get guys of that caliber, or that whatever their ranking is, right? Like I could not care less about what their ranking is. FSU prioritized him like a 5-star recruit. Financially, how much effort and resources they put into that recruitment. Like,
yeah, I wonder if they over like close to $1 million or probably close to over NIL and just recruiting stuff.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know exactly
like,
what
it was a big investment for multiple years, and you got very little in return for it.
For sure. That felt like the most noteworthy to me. I think Jalen Early hurts your depth on the O-line a little bit.
Real quick, let's stop at Hakeem real quick, because I do think that is a topic that is worth discussing if we're going to go there, because of the symbolism of it, Zach, to your point. So FSU has only signed one composite 5-star in the Mike Norvell era out of high school, and then one 24/7 sports ranked one in Demore Tate back in the transition class. And obviously that didn't work out very well. He's at FAMU now, I think. But went through after Hakeem Williams transferred and looked it up. FSU's first 5 classes, so it's past 5 under Mike Norvell and not including the 2025 one currently on campus here. The top ranked recruit in each of those classes has left already, and left without making much of an impact. I would say Destin Hill probably made the most impact as a co-starter for half a season, and that took 2 years to get him on campus. So it's not a great track record. I will say we did get some users who were like, well, is that just the NIL era where there's this quick burn and churn through rosters and guys are just quick to transfer out? And I think that was a reasonable thing to ask. I went through yesterday and looked at it, and I kind of had my suspicion of what it would look like, but looked at what Georgia does, and obviously they're at the A tier, but that's what you aspire to be, right? And yeah, their track record's pretty darn good. Miami has some hit or misses under Mario Cristobal, but they have guys who are in line to, at the top of their class, who are in line to contribute. Florida hit on DJ Lagway as long as he's healthy. Like that's a dude for you. And Clemson has hit more than it's missed, and no one has an 0 for 5 mark in that span. Like just a glaring 0 for 5 without much caveats there. So I don't know, Chris. I know sometimes I make too big a deal of things, but it does feel like a significant trend for Florida State to go after, not a ton of to not attain a bunch of blue chip players. And when you see the top ones in the class kind of fizzle out so quickly, I think that's damning.
It's a micro problem of a macro issue, which is that the hit rate of classes is not high enough. But when the top of your class, especially guys that like as Zach put it, that the program recruiting them turns into a primary target. Not what does 24/7 or any other outlet rank them, but what does FSU think of this kid? How much are they willing to invest, both financially and time-wise, in recruiting them? Where do they think they fit into the puzzle? When those ones don't pan out at a rate that is not sustainable, sub 50%, that's a negative for you as a program. In Hakeem's case, it was an important spring. I think we all spoke of that going into the spring. He breaks his thumb. He only participates in roughly, while they ended up only having the 13 practices, I think he participated right around maybe half of them, 5-6 of them. That's a big negative. Javon Boggs is a guy that probably emerged more in that role than someone like a Hakeem Williams, and that made him somewhat dispensable, especially when you consider dollars and cents of it. It's disappointing. I think the receiver issues are deeper than just the recruiting of it. I think the development of that position has been poor here. Ron Dugans wasn't an effective coach, and that shows with some of those guys that are carryovers in that room. And it's why that room's going to be led by 2 transfers in who are in their first year, and Deuce Robinson and Squirrel White. And potentially your next guy up is a true freshman, Javon Boggs. You got a few others in there. BJ Gibson comes to mind. Elijah comes to mind as guys that have a shot. But all in all, that room's sort of a mess. And it's mind-blowing, especially when you consider that the head coach played the position, that has been sort of allowed here. And I think the recruiting is a portion of the discussion, but I think it's broader than just simply that. But you cannot be successful with a low hit rate, especially when you're not accumulating a ton of guys that are viewed as high-level talent. Because if you only have so many high-level talents, those have to hit at a higher rate than the remainder of the class. But if the entire class has a low hit rate, it's not a positive for you at all. It just doesn't work. It doesn't build a foundation to your program.
Simply put, you're giving yourself very little wiggle room.
Yeah.
And the margin for error is slim, and we're now seeing kind of
you're also the cost, the financial part of all this comes into play. When you miss on that, that means you then have to go make up for it by pursuing in the portal. And if you're going to pursue to a high level where it's more of a sure thing in quotations, it's going to cost you more. And that's something that you have to deal with at a high level. And you only have so many dollars to spend to build a roster of 105 or however you're paying your roster, where that creates an issue within itself. Like, they invested in Hakeem because they believed there would be a return on investment. In reality, they got very little to no return on investment there. And that is a negative. That's the process of how a roster is now put together, and that doesn't work. You cannot sustain doing that. You have to have a better hit rate. FSU has 32 outgoing transfers currently here in this cycle between the spring and the fall, this past fall. That speaks to, like, man, a lot of misses, a lot of guys that didn't like, a lot of guys that didn't work out. And not all 32 are that way, but there's no, you went 2-10. Yes, there needs to be a churn and a burn to it, but there's a degree of, are you upgrading when you lose somebody? Are you getting better? Are you getting more of a sure thing? Or are you kind of repeating a mistake that you just got rid of? And that's going to be what ultimately plays a role in the outcome of the coming season for them.
I hate contributing to it, but it is a thing. Like, there is a narrative out there that other schools use that FSU can't develop, blue chip talent. And when this kind of thing happens, they're going to latch on to it. And you have to combat it. And that's something you have to do as a staff in combating it through how you talk to recruits, but you need to help yourself, and you need to hit on some of these and get them to develop eventually. Like getting Elijah Moore up to speed, getting Javon Boggs to contribute, like all those things can help you in the near future, but it has to happen. And right now, and we'll get into it in some of our depth chart talk later on, but your top two wide receivers by far are going to be transfers in again. So you can kind of keep living that life, but we've seen when you bet on Benson like you did last year, there's a chance it fizzles out for you pretty quickly too. So that's a dynamic that's certainly at play, I think. The other wide receivers, when Zach reported on Jordan Scott, it was interesting to see some of the reaction of like, oh my God, FSU had a guy for a few weeks or months and then left like it was this bad thing. But I don't know, guys. Like I think that's the way of the world now. That's happening all over the place in the portal era. I think that's healthy roster management. Like, all right, you had him. He was kind of soft, frankly, for a football player standards. He would obviously be much more tough than I am as a human being. But yeah, he was not someone who was standing out to FSU, and they didn't think he was playing like a 6'7" player. And you took your lottery ticket, didn't work out, and you cut bait pretty quickly. Good. I think.
Why waste each other's time? Like you can in your head think, oh, I can fix this, I can make them better, I can do that. And there's a degree in football where you have to do that. Guys have to improve when they go from 18 to 23 years old. But there's also times where this is what we thought we were getting, we didn't get that. It's not worth the effort to try to get it to a point that's somewhere in that ballpark, in that realm.
And I think anyway, so I'm fine with that. And then Jaylen Brown was the last one. That was interesting too. Like when we reported on it, the way that whole thing was reported on, it was initially we were told he's going to transfer. We got confirmation it was a transfer. As we're reporting that story, we're told, hey, there might be more to it than that. FSU was able to confirm departure. Takes a while to kind of get a police report in. And so anyways, the story kind of kept evolving. I did enjoy people on Twitter telling me my initial tweet was incorrect with the transfer portal when, we were the ones reporting and breaking on every single aspect of the story live. It just evolved as it happened. So that was fun. But that one I think actually hurts FSU perception wise. All right, let's parse this out. Chris does not think
should have run them after Duke last year.
That's true, but you have to think what their situation is and what the coaching staff is all. Just because you feel that way does not mean that that's how the program was operating.
I agree with Chris, and I think Chris's logic in this matter is wrong, and I think both are true.
Yeah,
Should have been done with him after Duke. Should have been done
I
with him
agree.
after fall.
I agree. And that's
Not
why
to be trusted.
the larger issue to me, as we like, this is the stuff that doesn't give us the warm and fuzzies, is that he was probably going to be your 4th or 5th wide receiver this year. Like, you are going to lean on him in part of your rotation. You can shrug your shoulders.
Guys are allowed to evolve. You're right there, but sometimes you don't need to give them the chance.
That's true. That is 100% true, Chris. But it still doesn't take away from the fact that he was being talked about like 2nd or 3rd most out of any receiver on the roster this spring, and he was in line to be a like potential starter type for them or heavy rotational type.
I was raised Catholic, so the nun would have cracked my knuckles if I rolled my eyes in her class. But like every time I heard that with Jaylen Brown, I wanted to roll my eyes all the way to the back of my head.
But I think that your energy should be more focused on the fact that if that was the case, that's a red flag, right? The fact that like that.
Tell Chris how to feel. That's going to work well.
No, Zach's right. I am not arguing against Zach's point there. I'm just saying that if you're relying on Jaylen Brown, you're up, you know what creek.
That's fair.
They might be up that creek.
They haven't lost a guy in these 8 that like it pained me or hurt me. Hakeem's the one because I like the kid first and foremost, and secondly, I do think there's talent to tap into there, though it never happened at FSU. But other than that, like we're trading backups for backups. I forget who said that, but somebody made that comment about the portal, and that's what it's kind of become. And FSU certainly, it appears, doing such a thing.
Let's look at it this way, through actions. And I think actions are important because the transfer portal does give us a very cool mechanism to view needs and how the coaching staff views things in real time. Like, we don't have to necessarily have a back and forth on this of what we think it means. They immediately, and Jaylen Brown was not someone they were expecting to leave. He got arrested on a felony charge for drug possession. I mean, that's what happened. And obviously, he'll have to stay in court and whatnot, but that's what the charges were. And Mike Norvell doesn't play that game. The staff freaks out when there's a negative drug test. I can only imagine what the conversation was when they found out there was a felony charge with drugs. Gone. Dismissed off the team roster within hours of that arrest happening. Okay.
Yeah. So
hang on real quick. Let me just finish it. And then within hours after that, within 24 hours after that, there were 2 offers out to transfers who were fast, gadgety types that Jaylen Brown was.
Yeah,
there wasn't that after Hakeem Williams. There wasn't that after Jordan Scott. It came immediately after Jaylen Brown.
I think the count's at 10 receivers, 11 when Mallory arrived. It might be 9, 10, or 10, 11. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. You want to carry around 12, so I'm not shocked they offered guys. And yes, they offered guys that were similar to Jaylen because that's probably what they need. They have a big outside receiver in a Deuce Robinson. They have the super gadgety, quick, smaller guy in Squirrel. I think they want something that kind of fits in between those two. Jaylen was sort of a skill set that lends itself to that.
They also offered starting caliber guys too, I would say. And I think that's those weren't, the BYU kids wanting more than.
I mean, the San Jose State kid, sure, but that's a big upgrade in what you're playing. Like, he was good against, I think it was Washington State. He was also very good against, I want to say, Stanford.
Yeah.
So, like, he's shown it against the kind of caliber opponents you're playing in the ACC with a Stanford, for example. But, like, it's all a damn gamble. Like, nobody, they've not offered anybody at receiver who's a Keon Coleman, a sure thing, plain and simple. They've offered guys who they project that can be good and probably truthfully can be better than anything they've lost. But at the same time, I'm not falling in the trap of a season ago again, where we think, oh, this guy from the portal is going to be good, just going to magically happen, especially when they're coming in post spring, only have the ramp up of August. Like, I just can't do it. I've de-wired myself from being able to do that. I'm sorry.
I think it relates more to like what FSU thought or is thinking about what they need, right? And if Jaylen Brown was the 4th or 5th receiver in the rotation exiting the spring, I mean, they weren't offering receivers before he departed the program. We believed that they were going to explore the portal for help at receiver, especially after Jordan Scott and Hakeem left the program. but it became like an immediate like need after Jaylen Brown left, which I think is the important thing to note, because like we didn't see that kind of urgency for FSU in the portal at receiver specifically before the news of Jaylen Brown's departure. And like on the note of like those two guys and whether they'll be, starters, I mean, they're being prioritized not just by FSU, but by like, multiple SEC and ACC schools as starter types, financially, and just how they're being recruited in the transfer portal.
I like the BYU kid more than I like the San Jose State kid.
I feel the opposite, but I like the BYU kids fit, and ultimately I don't think you're going to be able to afford either of those guys. So
yeah, and they've already got multiple visits set up. I think the San Jose State kid is going to end up at Louisville most likely, because I heard that's the team that pushed him in. And then
Tamper?
Marion is the BYU kid. Keelan Marion is probably going to take multiple visits, he told Dane, but you know how that goes. He likes one spot, he hears the right number, and that could be over. So we'll see. But I know FSU is talking to both, but they're also, I've been told, talking to other receivers in the portal. So try to dig on that as well.
I thought this conversation is good because I think we're probably representing different sections of how people view it, and I think that's healthy. With the departures, where are we at, Chris? 102 is what we have projected with players coming in.
I think it's 101. 93 currently, 101 with additions, I believe, is where the numbers land.
Yes, 101. So I actually had that on the spreadsheet. I just was still. I've been like a one behind for the last 2 or 3 days. They're at 101. The number's going to most likely be 105. That still hasn't been settled yet, but it'll most likely be 105. So right now you have room to add 4, which a wise man once said, numbers take care of themselves. That was also just Josh's way of not wanting to have to deal with the numbers that I invited into this conversation. Let's see. All right. That is the portal opening. That's who's leaving. Do we want to talk about the depth chart and the way it's kind of comprised exiting spring first, or do we want to get into some of the transfer portal strategy? My vote is portal, but this is a democracy. Or sorry, my vote is depth chart, democracy. I'll let you guys vote as well on it.
Well, don't the two conversations kind of intertwine?
That's the beauty of it.
Let's start with the depth chart and then move into portal.
All right, so I am posting projected depth charts on Knowles 24/7, basically just based on all the intel we've gotten, not from the scrimmage access we got. I closed my eyes the entire time. There is nothing from that is going into the depth chart, especially given that like half the offense wasn't there that day. So,
no one can hear you.
Okay, good. Probably I didn't want to. I caught myself. This is maturity. This is me growing up in real time, guys. What was that look, Chris? No, don't want to. No, gonna move on. All right, so I think on offense, looking at it, like kind of more or less chalk to what we were thinking. Thomas Castellanos, Brock Glenn as the quarterbacks, Kevin Sperry emergence, noteworthy. Tight end group they felt really good with. I think all 4 of those guys contribute. Let's start at like running back here, because we were talking about this a little bit some in the group chat when we were putting this together last night. I had Usman Kroma as my projected starter for fall. Chris's point was to change it up a little bit, and I think it made sense.
Yeah, it's a little, I hate the term, but wish casting. I mean, the hope is
I hate that.
The hope is that Kroma can come in and make a massive impact, and we also think he's an immensely talented young player, and we know they've invested in him in that same thought process. That being said, I don't think you can exit spring with a guy who's not on the roster as a guy who's your number one, unless we know definitively that, like, hey, we recruited this guy, he's going to be our one, and the guy who was projected as one says, well, I'm out of here, and pieces out. That's an example where that's sort of allowed, that interchange, but to me, it's a getting ahead of yourself a bit to do that out of the spring with a guy who was not here in the spring.
I can't get over Roydo Williams averaged 2 yards per carry last year. Like, and I understand there are caveats to it, but man, 2.
I agree with you. I'm hesitant to think Roydell can be your feature back throughout an entire season. I do know that Gus Malzahn talks about him in a positive manner, and it's not like a forced. It's more like a guy he liked when he walked in the door, and then he got to work with him in the spring type of manner. Yeah, I don't love that room. I like Jalen Lucas as a playmaker because I think he can do things, but Gus loves to run the ball the way they want to run the ball. I'm very interested to see how that all shakes out as we get into the season.
like this past year at UCF, RJ Harvey, he's like a 4.4 athlete, like one of the best athletes in a really good running back draft. And like his running style was bounce stuff outside. Like it could be more polished, but point being is like that's an elite athlete that you had running that, that offense for you to make it go. I don't buy or Sonone sponsored by
The
The
Turner
Turner.
Group.
if you didn't have to worry about Usman Kroma like not arriving on campus, or like if he signed and it was like the good old days where you could sign and not leave for years. This is a bad buy or Sonone because I'm rambling. Sorry, Colin. You would be taking a running back transfer now.
If Chroma didn't exist, yeah. Or
No, not
if
Chroma didn't
you
exist.
didn't
If Chroma, you
financially
didn't have to worry
invest
about
in him as you did.
even you didn't have to worry about Chroma
Like getting
leaving.
spooked.
Yeah.
I think back to our conversation with Alfred, where he talked about positions and the financial values dedicated to them, the NFL model idea. I feel like they've allotted their sum for the running back room with the addition
Yeah.
of Chroma.
I feel like
If that didn't
Good
exist,
point.
like if there were no politics, no concerns like that, then yeah, you always stockpile talent if you can. I think running back room is a place where if you can get a more sure thing who's definitive to the system you intend to run, then you do it. But they're not going to do it with Chroma already there. Plus, that room's relatively still crowded.
Can I make my argument against that? Because I think that's a fair point.
That's a Sonone for the record.
Okay, so now, do you want to give your real quick? I think the allocation and percentage wise for the cap, I think changes a little bit for a offense like Gus Malzahn's that is so run heavy, and in a year when you need to do well to salvage like where the direction trajectory of this thing is going from just even an optics standpoint. Um, Running back is probably one of the safest positions where you can project what a transfer's production was at a prior school to like if they can run the football, you can run the football for the most part. Like there's not a huge like.
But didn't Roydell average about 2 times per carry what he did at Bama than what he did at FSU this past season?
Ooh, if you can run the football, you can run the football, Brendan.
Right? Wasn't he? I think he was like a.
He was like 5 yards a carry.
Yeah. And he
So
averaged
over double, almost triple.
Well,
none of it's
all an offensive line. Then what do I know? Go ahead, Zach.
I think they'd have to lose like 2 in the room, 1 to 2 to be able to make an addition. But I do think that if there wasn't the like threat of, not that this is a real thing, but like, or a real thing now, but the threat of like Chroma leaving, if you bring in like a running back 1 type, then I think they would go for one because of what you said, Brendan. It's such an important year. The running back is the feature position in the Gus Malzahn offense because of how much they do run the football. And it doesn't feel like they have a ton of great fits for this inside zone scheme compared to what Gus has had in previous spots. Like I think Chroma probably is a good fit for what they're trying to do, but to put that much pressure on him immediately without having an entire spring football to get used to this offense is a little wild. So to me, I think they should go and add one and just kind of see how the room shakes, make sure that's communicated to Chroma and you just kind of, because no one else in the room leaving would like drastically impact my thinking of that room and its future right now. Do you guys feel the same way?
No,
I mean, I think the future of that room is Chroma.
Yeah, but like the other guys, like a Cam Davis, Keziah Holmes, like I just, to me, it doesn't feel like a lot of those guys are great fits for what they need this year.
In the Cam Davis one, we probably shouldn't gloss over. Like that was not a name we heard very often this spring. I guess transparently, like we did hear from a couple people before spring that there was concerns with the new regime on offense, like whether he would be a good fit for the inside zone scheme, his running style, and that married with not hearing from him a ton in the spring, like that's another player who you've invested a lot of time and resources into recruit and to have on campus. And we'll see what it ends up looking like, but that's not, he doesn't seem to be a major part of the plans as of this point. And I think that's just another data point for us to go over. Offensive line, it was tough to tell, but I think like we know who their 4 transfers in were. We know they liked Richie Leonard when healthy. As long as that group's healthy, and the spring wasn't great in that regard for a veteran group. We've heard that one before. But when that group's healthy, we kind of have a good idea of who the starting lineup is. I think Andre Otto is your 6th man at like you can play multiple spots. Jake Rizzi when healthy.
Washington.
What was that?
Your Darius Washington.
Yeah, that hurts.
You were talking about Rizzy. He got banged up in the spring.
Right.
Hurt, I believe, right knee was one of his 2 knees that he banged up.
50-50 shot there, Chris.
I thought it was the right one. I'm not 100%
He
sure.
did, yeah, he had surgery, and it should be good before the season. So, that's decent depth pieces as well. But like looking at Jalen Early leaving, I don't know. Right now you're unless you start right now, Lucas Simmons is probably your top backup tackle. Now, if there were an injury, do they put Lucas Simmons in at left tackle, or do they move like Adrian Medley to left guard and someone in Otto to left, or Medley to left tackle and Otto into left guard? Those are so I don't know exactly what that would look like, but if you're able to now with some of the room that you've opened up, both financially and from a roster standpoint, get a swing tackle. And I know everyone's looking for a swing tackle. I think that's worth exploring and kicking the tires on just to have an extra insurance policy if possible. So that's kind of the depth chart on offense. On defense, I had a hard time with that, guys. Like I have 8 different players at Jack right now. And I think that's kind of the cool thing of the scheme. Interior defensive line, Daryl Jackson, Kevin Wynn apparently got better late in the spring per Zach's reporting. KJ Sampson, Daniel Lyons, Deontay McCray can play inside, outside. Mandrell Desser. Desire, darn it. No, it's not Desire. That was Chris butchering it last time. Desir. And then field defensive end, I have James Williams, Diamante Diggs, Jason Jenkins. Could also see Deontay McCray play there as well. So I think you have like depth in different body types, but I don't know, guys. I think you should add, if you can afford it, I think like either an interior or a speed. I'm more proponent of a speed guy to help out with Amari Williams in that transition. Some for passing down stuff. Buy or Sonone, speed guy should be a priority.
I'm always buying more D linemen. I don't even care what type it is. Just if it can help you win games, you buy it.
I think the issue
injuries
is
rack up, and you always just need more bodies.
You can play games. Like look at the Philadelphia Eagles have been awesome at that. They load up on it. And you can play different games with where you line guys up and have a fresh wave of pass rushers. You can win a Super Bowl or 2 doing that. You can win some playoff games doing that. I do worry that the market has kind of already like come and gone for the speed rushers. So there's a handful of good ones. I think FSU was. We can talk about that in a little bit, but
the USF kid fits into that discussion, right?
I think he's more of a run. Like he's a good athlete, but he's 6'1", 280. I think he would fit really well in the scheme, but I don't know if I would look at him as like a speedy edge type necessarily. He could maybe be like an edge setter on early downs, and if that's what you get, that's what you get. I wouldn't stick my nose up at that. He does have a dismissal from Wake Forest, so you probably have to look into that as well. But what was it? Gooden? Is that the name?
Yeah, Bernard Gooden.
But yeah, there's some options. But we loved Stephen Daly. He came and went from Kent State. The Troy kid, I'm blanking on the name right now.
Philip Lee.
He went to Arkansas, came and went. Like the stuff moves fast.
That's a guy that should have gone on. He's from Jacksonville. He has multiple FSU fans in his family and friends. I thought he made a lot of sense.
The Army kid went to Georgia. Like, what are you going to do there? But he's from St. Augustine. But Georgia, I saw Clint Brewster tweeted out yesterday, who covers the transfer portal for us and is connected. What was that, Chris?
Georgia's drafting.
Yeah, they are. What are you going to do? Like that I don't, that is what it is. But Brewster tweeted out a quote from a GM who's like, yeah, in the transfer portal, you might have 3 or 4 minutes to evaluate a kid and try to get the first visit.
Yeah, oftentimes it's less because they already know where they're going.
Like the North Dakota State defensive tackle had to do not.
Yeah, he's going to Virginia Tech.
Yeah. So anyways, I think you could use help there. And we'll see what you can do to bolster that room a little bit. But like I think that's a pretty healthy room. Like in my confidence ratings, I think it's an above average power four group. Do you guys agree?
It's so tough without actually seeing it in action in the scheme. What Tony's asking guys to do, I think there's enough talent to get by in that room. Yes, I don't think it's a dominant group, like not even in the realm of conversation. But I don't think it's a group that's going to put you at a disadvantage necessarily. I also think it helps that the group immediately behind was probably as good as it's been here in a good while.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think they're like Daryl Jackson and maybe James Williams are your two like difference maker types, I think. But everyone else is just, they're good players, but I wouldn't call them great. But maybe they develop into that, heading into the season.
Taking those two names out of the equation, who would you bet on the most?
Deontay McRae.
Yeah, and and it just seems so simple, but the way he conveys himself, the way he carries himself, the way he goes about things, and also the feedback we've gotten about what he did on the field, all of that is very, very positive.
It is weird. They talk about Diamante Diggs, I think, more highly than Deontay McRae, and that surprises me a little bit.
I think they're intrigued by Diggs because that frame's freaky. I mean, he's very, very long kid, good athleticism mixed in there. Wasn't me.
It was me, but I have my thing on Do Not Disturb. Someone just disrupted my Do Not Disturb. It's messed up.
Yeah, Diggs, I've shared the story. I got to see Diggs actually do it because somebody I've known for a long time and trust in that world of college football was surprised FSU was taking him.
Okay. Linebacker.
I love me some Elijah Herring.
Yeah, I know you're in on that. I'm in on Omar Graham, guys. I know. We'll see. You want to be like, nah, but I think I'm in on
we
that.
Can tell who went to Ireland and who did it. No, Omar got better as the year went on last year. And I've been very pleased with Omar. And one thing I'll give Omar, he works his backside off. He is a kid that cares about his craft.
One of the most Omar Graham barely practiced that week. He was hurt. And the fact that he ended up starting and playing that much was nuts to me. That was so unfair.
It's still one of the most unexplained things to me from last season.
Yeah, we were like, was Juice suspended? No.
Because he played on special teams.
Yeah, there was no like. Yeah, and it's funny. There's that season ended up becoming such a cluster. You know what? That gets lost in the shuffle as one of the more perplexing things. But that's a good one. That's right up there for sure. But linebacker, all of a sudden, to me, guys, like I feel good about that. I almost gave it. Did I give it a 7 out of? I think I gave it a 7 out of 10. So like 70th%. Like I think it's a solid group, and I don't know if you have a dude there, which probably puts a cap to it. But like I think you have at least 5 capable ones in different roles.
Yeah, I know the staff feels that way. Like I think that's the only position group that like if they don't lose anyone, they would not take a guy in the portal. I'm not here saying that they're going to go take a quarterback, but I think they feel very, very solid about that linebacker room.
Yeah, I think it's warranted at this point. Well, we'll see, but I think I've been hurt before, but I think it's been warranted. Finally, let's talk about the secondary. That's a group to me that like safety I look at as very volatile, and it could be like it could hit and be really, really good, and it could miss and you be in deep, you know what. I think there's a good deal of variance to that between Edwin Joseph, Earl Little, and Shaheem Brown. Those are all really good athletes. Those are also guys and they've all had some bright moments and they've all had some not so bright moments on film. So safety, a bit of an unknown to me. They feel good about that group, I think, especially Earl. They seemed really happy with him at Rover. But that's a position you could add to, in my opinion, still just with how important it is to the Tony White scheme. We've talked about that before. Cornerback, though, Zach, I think that's a little bit more interesting. I think cornerback is where you get into it and say maybe that wasn't what exactly you were hoping it would be going into the spring as a coaching staff.
Yeah, well, like I remember heading out of winter conditioning workouts, they were sky high on Quindarius Jones and were thinking that he was going to be cornerback 1 for them. But it's taken a while for him to adjust to the new scheme. He was in the previous scheme running press man coverage all the time, essentially, and didn't have to worry about too many other assignments. But now with this scheme, he's, having to learn off man, zone coverages, and a number of other things with Tony White's new defense. So I don't, he's been inconsistent in practices, and that's, I think, is caused a little bit of uncertainty with that room as a whole, because then you have, you're projecting Jabril Rawls, who by all accounts has had a good spring, had an injury at one point, but was playing well when he was out there. But he's he hasn't really given you much reps to this point in his career. So to go and strut him out there as cornerback one is a little nerve-wracking to me. And then you got some younger talent in that room, but once again, they're inexperienced, and some of those guys like a Charles Lester have dealt with injuries. Shamar Arnaud is someone that we're all very high on, and I know the staff thinks highly of, but he's a true freshman who just stepped on campus, and he's got a ways to go, even though he showed a lot of promise in spring ball. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Brendan. It is a group that gives me some uncertainty. It's a group that I thought I would feel more confident in exiting the spring than I do now. But the mix of injuries, inexperience, and just some inconsistency in play by some of the guys that you believed were going to be more dependable, at least at this point. That's not saying that they can't change it or get better and get more comfortable with the scheme. It leads me to think that they definitely need someone in the transfer portal at that spot.
Yeah, I look at it in the prism of the too deep. It's sort of you're very quickly relying on essentially a redshirt freshman or a true freshman once you get into too deep at that position. And if it was a no doubt sure thing at the top of the chart, maybe that concern is less. But I don't think they're exiting spring with that being the opinion at the two spots.
You're muted, Brendan.
Darn. I just did a big sign said so you guys didn't really miss much of anything. I think this is a good place for us to now transition into transfer portal needs after going into it. And I think, as we look at the roster, we're currently at 101. So let's say 4 spots is what you had. And obviously there's gonna be some financial restrictions. People have asked a lot about the finances. I think you made your big splash in the winter window, but you can probably afford a couple starting level players. I just don't think you can be in big competing bidding war types is kind of what we're going to see. We'll see. If a Keon Coleman type does enter the market, maybe you say, all right, we find some funds and you figure that out, right? But for now, there's some restrictions to it, but you can add starting caliber players. So positions, guys, let's say 4 is what you got to add. 2 backups, 2 starters. Where do you allocate your 2 starters to?
Go ahead,
I'll start off with cornerback. I'll start the bidding there. I think you had a starting corner or starting safety, 1 starting DB.
Yeah, I would go corner, 100%.
I would go D-line.
I mean, they had their chance. I think that's potentially passed. Does it matter where on the defensive line, Chris?
I think no, just somebody that can impact the pass or impact play. I think if you're better at the defensive line, it softens your concerns in the secondary.
That's fair.
The only way you're getting somebody in secondary that changes it up front is a guy who's a true lockdown, and while those are ultra expensive and very rare to come by in the portal at this point in time.
Would you? All right. So I was going to say my second one, if I had to say a starter, would either be defensive line and be in lockstep with you there, Chris, or it would be a wide receiver. But call me crazy. I know that some of the offense we went over didn't give you the warm and fuzzies, but I really like Deuce Robinson and Squirrel White. I think that's a really good 1-2 combo. I think that fits in nicely. The depth does scare me. You're 1 injury away from that being really, really bleak. But I do like those 2 quite a bit. So I like the idea of going after a starting wide receiver. But man, I think I'm going to side with you, Chris. I think a defensive lineman would be my next up. So if I had to get 2 starters, I'd want an edge, more of a speedy type of edge guy. and a starting quarterback. So that'd be my two.
Yeah, I would go as well an edge as well. I know we're not really differentiating here, but
I mean, that's if we're all kind of thinking the same thing. That's usually, except for the time we thought they'd win 9 to 10 games last year. We're not all correct.
Idiots.
Should have not done what Vegas was saying and Nick Saban. And
Brendan, don't get defensive.
sorry,
I oddly go O-line, and you're not going to find a starter quality offensive tackle.
probably not.
But I think I view the offense in the prism of they're going to be run first. And from a passing standpoint, it's going to be less traditional and more motion, eye candy, get it out quick, allow your quarterback to extend plays with his legs type stuff. I don't love the receiver group after the top two of Deuce and Squirrel, but I think Boggs had a very good spring, and I'm willing to roll with it. And hopefully you can find somebody else from that next group, the Friars, Elijah Moores, BJ Gibson, so on and so forth, that can elevate and step up as a solid, dependable guy. That would be a top 4 or 5 for you. But I think you got a good tight end group. I think Randy Pittman obviously fits your offense because he came from your offense. Chase Lofton's been a guy that they've been very high on. There's enough other pieces in that group that I think they have some guys. And then a guy like Chroma is an excellent pass-catching running back. So I think you have enough pieces to distribute the ball in the passing game. To me, if you're going to be a run-heavy team and you're going to have to protect, and you have a quarterback who, one, you can't allow to get hit constantly unless he brings about contact because he's running it, and two, he's going to run it, so you need to have guys who can block it. I just think you got to throw bodies at the O-line. You got to keep adding it. When I look at the O-line group, Pettis, Medley, Pettibon, Hansen, Ritchie, those are your top guys. But your next tier is what? Rizzi, Otto, Simmons, and then you're getting in like Daniels and Atite. Like, to me, you've got to put something, maybe it's not that top 5, but it's got to be that buffer between that top 5 and that next group.
That was going to be my tier. Below would be a swing.
My next thing would be a DB, because I do think it's important to add a high quality DB. Probably a veteran who's just understands the system, a guy who fits it well. I don't know that you necessarily want to take someone that goes above Jones or above Jabril Rawls in the sense of immediately taking their job. But I think it's good to have somebody that pushes those guys and forces them to be more competitive in the area that they're in and just understands what you're asking. I think a veteran guy who's good at it, maybe somebody that's played for you previously or plays in a very similar system to what you're trying to execute.
All right. I think we're all kind of on the same page there, right? I don't know. Yeah. Sorry. No, it's not great. It's much more entertainment when we're arguing with each other over Jaylen Brown. Buyers and Unknowns sponsored by
the Turner Group.
I don't have to worry about tagging his name incorrectly ever again.
Who does that move on to? Who holds that designation now? Well, when I do anything basketball, I have to change Luke from player to coach every single time. That's
I got a pet peeve with you, Chris. This is you, buddy. It happened this morning. Changing Thomas Castellanos to Tommy. I know he said he goes by Tommy, but he's Thomas Castellanos.
The worst is when Chris changes someone like for example, KJ Kirkland, he puts the periods.
That's how KJ spells it.
That's how it's spelled on the FSU roster.
How is Thomas Castellanos spelled?
It is
Tommy on the FSU roster.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh my God! All right, I'm wrong.
I'm sorry you want government names, but I'm going by the FSU roster for names.
And every time you put someone the third or junior, you have to go.
The third drives me nuts. The fact that the system doesn't recognize it.
Shaheem Brown's a pain in the ass because for some reason it tags Brown College.
Yes, it doesn't take his first name; it only takes his last name.
Yeah, that's a pain.
Jamari Howard, that would happen, I'm sure, on second reference when you use Howard.
Yeah. But the Shaheem Brown happens on the first reference.
Yeah, it's weird with Shy. Yeah.
BJ Gibson doesn't tag.
It's Washington turns into Washington on the second reference. And turns into college.
That would be one. But hey, we don't have to worry about that one anymore. Portal strategy. Let's talk about it real quick because I think we have thoughts on it. I have concerns, fellas. I'm going to voice them. This is in the see something, say something realm. It feels like FSU was slow to start off this process. And I will caveat, there was a tragedy and incident that happened on campus on Thursday. And I do want to address that probably slows things down to an extent, but some of these issues were beforehand. And on the topic of the tragedy, if you were a student on campus, if you're a parent listening, you had a student on campus, they need help. The University Counseling Center is like a really, really good tool and resource to use. My wife worked there, unfortunately, during the last campus shooting. And so, yeah, just if you are looking for help to kind of go through and process, this traumatic thing that happened, that would be a resource I'd recommend for you to go. Or if you have a friend or whatever, it's free for students. There's really good, well-trained people that work there. So anyways, no easy way to transition, my bad guys, but FSU's portal strategy, I do have concerns about it. And some of this did start, even before the portal period. It did not seem like they were, I don't know, what would you say, Zach, like in lockstep, ready to go, to even have like an idea of like what all their needs were and stuff. It doesn't feel great. Some of the feedback and some of the process stuff we've seen so far.
Yeah. Like I've heard behind the scenes, like just a change in what they feel like they need, like a week into the portal, or, like 5 days in, just different, like, and not much has changed on their roster to kind of reflect those changes. So yeah, I mean, last portal window, I was, in winter, I was definitely critical of them waiting to host visits for basically an entire week. I think it opened on a Monday. The portal opened on a Monday, and they waited until that following Monday to start hosting visitors on campus. And that was a huge reason why they lost out on a guy like Nebraska defensive lineman Jamari Butler, who we all think probably entered the portal with the idea of following Terrence Knighton and Tony White to Tallahassee. He takes a visit to LSU first and signs there. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me for an organization that's known, like they built their early success with the transfer portal on acting quick, moving fast on prospects, getting them on campus as soon as possible. I mean, that is the norm for how you successfully navigate the transfer portal. And it just feels like that's not happening the same way as it used to for FSU. There's a multitude of reasons we could get into. One is they're coming off a 2-10 season, so they're not the most attractive option in the transfer portal.
But that's different.
Yeah,
like that's not the same as the process.
That's true, but there are probably players that they would have liked to get on campus who are not even considering them, or you know what I mean? Like there's that aspect to it.
You're saying with some like the pre-portal stuff potentially?
Yeah, and I do agree. Like I see an issue in them being kind of slow to react to some of this stuff, and I do want to reserve my like final judgment on their process until the dust settles on this period, because I was critical early on of what they were doing in the winter, but they seem to kind of piece it together pretty well with the guys that they added at positions of need. So definitely interested to see how it closes out for them. But I do agree, I was kind of waiting for them to really get after it. It just hasn't felt like that yet with their efforts in this window.
I just don't think they're going to be big spenders in this window. I mean, they went and added ballpark 10 to 12 starters in the last window. I mean, Elijah Herring, probably like a Jason Jenkins, James Williams, potentially a Deontay McCray, for example, 4 O linemen, 2 wide receivers, a quarterback. That's 11. Pittman would be 12. So yeah, 12, 13. I just think that's where the spending was done. Like I think now it's about kind of shoring up your 22 on each side of the ball, your 44 that you go to war with and hope you win with. And then, that's getting a swing lineman, for example, a DB who's reliable. I just don't think they're going to be big spenders. Now, are there guys they probably could have tapped into already who fit some of those parameters? Yeah. It's not been sorry.
I thought he was getting emotional at first.
No, just something in the throat. It's not been overly aggressive. So yeah, I see that point of view, but I also just don't think it's going to be a whole lot number wise. And I also think there's a certain tier of player who's looking for dollars and roles that I don't think fit what they're in the shopping for.
Yeah. I mean, one would think that, like, especially DB, like you pretty much need a starting level corner. And I know that there's some worry with like, hey, you go pay this guy this large amount because that's how the spring window works. High demand, low supply. Guys get astronomically higher values for entering in this window at premium positions like corner or D tackle or offensive tackle.
To that point, we also know values have just been naturally driven up by the fact that so many kids have portaled recently with house settlement coming. The market itself has driven up the values.
Yeah, a lot of these like collective types feel like this is their last chance to really spend big before all the deals have to be monitored and cleared by the under the house settlement. So, yeah, I mean, I think that like if they do have money to spend, I don't know the specifics to how much they're working with, but it feels like they definitely like their biggest need to me is DB, and I just like that them not landing a DB would like especially a corner would very drastically change how I feel about the team heading into the season. Like that feels like the position where like if they don't add one, like that could really hurt them from a number standpoint too.
Do you think they feel that way?
I do, but I also like that's definitely the position they've been the most active with in communicating with transfers from my understanding. But that hasn't led to any visits to this point. So yeah, I'm interested to see if that amps up because I do think that that's like a spot where they absolutely need to add one receiver, especially at like a depth type. Whenever you're trying to add depth, it's hard in the portal because some other school out there is willing to pay that guy starter level money, most likely. But at receiver depth feels important as well. And then obviously we talked about D-line.
So do you think I'm overreacting a little bit and being – you guys seem more measured than I am. I'm like, I don't feel great about the way it started.
I didn't expect much of it, I think is where I land. I didn't think FSU was going to be ultra aggressive, big spender, get a lot of big names on campus in this portal window. I just didn't expect that going into this portal window.
I think it's less about the big spending and big names. It's more about just like anyone. You have unlimited official visits now.
Zach's idle hands are killing him. He really hates that there's not been a soul on campus. Well, I am surprised there hasn't yet been one.
But that's the point is like you have unlimited official visits, right? Maybe there's a guy you're not completely sure about. Hey, he has some character concern that we heard about. Let's vet it in person. Let's get him on campus for 48 hours, 24 hours, whatever. Be around this kid and his family for however long and get an idea of what the mental makeup is. Whatever evaluation term you want to use. I think that's what like is missing in this process for FSU. I reported heading into the window that they were not going to be top spenders. They were not going to be in it for the top tier P4 transfers. That's just the case. Unless it was a guy like a James Williams or someone of that type where there's a clear connection to the staff and it's like, hey, this is a good player from a P4 school, but he's coming here because of this reason. But like the, G5 high productive player or like, middle to high productive players, the FCS overachiever types, like those are the guys I think you should be getting to campus, getting updated measurements on, making sure their injury, like they're good, of good health and evaluating their mental makeup. That's the part that I feel like I'm the most worried about because this is the first real window along with the winter where you get unlimited OVs. Just bring in as many guys that you think are capable as possible, even if you don't even know if you're going to, take them or you're going to make a decision after the visit. Like, I just think that that's what I expected them to do, maybe a little bit more than basically having no activity to this point.
Isn't that kind of like, I think that's more when I'm talking about the process. It's not even like setting up officials, although that like, if you have your strategy there, you have your strategy. I can agree or disagree with that. But it seems to me like positions, like players at positions of need are either popping on the radar and going back to like the Clint Brewster reference that he had with the GM that he talked to, if like it can be 3 or 4 minutes, like that might be a little dramatic, but within hours, like you need to have idea on this guy enters the portal, you have an evaluation on him, you have a grade on him, your position coach signs off, coordinator signs off, and the head coach signs off. GM has to sign off too. Boom, 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 boom.
Traditionally in transfers, FSU has gotten more often than not. We hear Mike Norvell was one of my first calls or was my first call. They were very active.
And that we're not hearing. And I think that's where it's like, I don't know what the breakdown is. I can't pretend to like know for sure. I have some ideas based on like things that we've heard, but I can't like accurately say with total confidence what it is. I just know that dynamic that you just referenced, Chris, is something we're not hearing, and that is a change that I find, because I thought with Mike Norvell becoming CEO Mike that this type of stuff would be speedlined. I thought that was a pro. That was a reason for signing or hiring Gus Malzahn. And so far, I haven't seen that. I haven't felt it. And that to me falls in the see something, say something line. And to Zach's point, we can, there's still another couple weeks left of, visit times and stuff. I think there's another, 5-6 days?
Is on 3 days. Today plus 3 days, Friday
okay.
The 25th.
So there's still more names to go in, but they're flying off. Excuse me, I'm getting emotional now. They're flying off quickly. And to hear that defensive end wasn't necessarily a big need going into the portal window, and now it's become one, and like some of the good ones have already gone. Like I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm confused by it, and I would like for it to make more sense. Is that a somber note for us to end this on?
You're so negative.
Zach, your lighting's awful on this today, by the way. And that doesn't help me saying that 58 minutes in, but awful. Dude,
I'm trying to move out of this apartment. A lot going on, right?
Whenever Zach has to move, it's just world. Well, no, we won't go there because it's all hell breaks loose. All right, for Chris Nee, Zach Blossing, I'm Brendan Sonnone. This has been On the Bench. This has been another great episode of OTB. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you guys later. Sorry, Colin.